Hey guys, before we start the episode, I just wanted to pop in quickly and let you guys know that we're basically hitting our 100th episode right now. And we just wanted to take a few minutes to thank you guys so much, whether you're just tuning into the show or if you've been listening to us for a little while. We appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for all of your support. Thank you for listening regularly, for any kind of interaction that you have with us. We can't wait for another 100 episodes. We can't wait to keep doing this. So join us and hope you enjoy this episode. Hey there, fictional friends, and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it is the end of the month of April, so it's the end of our coverage of Americana.
Oh my gosh, that went by so fast.
It did. Probably because we record all these episodes way ahead of time, so we do them all within like a 48-hour span.
Well, and then what ends up happening is I think of a whole bunch of stuff after. I'm like, oh...
Yeah, I know. Oh, you're like, oh, fuck, we didn't cover that. Oh, damn it, we didn't talk about that. It is really difficult, and I feel like that happens to us. I feel like that must happen to everybody all the time, but I feel like that happens so often, like you're having a conversation about something that you're like, oh yeah, and there's totally this aspect of things as well. It's really hard. It's really hard to like do something like that. Anyway, so today to kind of like close things out, I guess for the month of April and Americana, we're talking about, because we're going to talk a bit about more about like modern Americana. And when I'm thinking of that, obviously, like, you know, there are much older novels and things like that that fall into that like Americana kind of sphere. But I guess when I started thinking about modern Americana, yeah, okay, fine. Like a lot of people consider like certain novels that were published in like the 1950s and 60s and whatnot modern. I'm trying to think of things that were published like after like the mid 1980s and things like novels that are really much more modern. And I know, like, you know, novel, like fiction from 60, 70 years ago technically falls into the modern literature sphere. I really wonder when that cutoff date's going to happen.
Well, it's just odd, right? Because when you think about it, like, we've had so much of a boom in technology and, you know, advancement in many, many ways over the last, like, 30 years.
Yeah.
That it's like, I struggle to say that something from 60 years ago is modern, just because it's like, if I'm reading something from 50, 60 years ago, yes, it's covering like social issues that like maybe we're still working through, or that we overcame and it made things a little bit better in some ways. Yeah. But it really doesn't touch on that modern aspect for me.
No, that's it. And so I find like when we're thinking of it, I'm like, no, I really want that modern sensibility, like something that is, you know, that was published after a certain period of time that gives us a little bit more insight that way, even if it's like maybe more of a period piece. Yeah. Something that's like a little bit more, that's it, like, like, you know, like more like actually like a modern setting to a degree and a modern sensibility.
Totally.
Anyway, yeah.
What would you say, in your opinion, like give me an example of a novel that would fit under a modern Americana for you?
I would say, and I'm sure, I don't think I'm the only one, I was like looking at like different ideas and stuff. I would say something like The Road by Cormac McCarthy falls into that modern Americana kind of like vibe, you know, set not in like necessarily like a super, like a much older time, like more like set at the time that it was written, basically. And very, like a very full scope, very many landscapes, all kinds of things. Yes, in a different kind of way because it's sort of post-apocalyptic. Right. But really still has that sense of striving for something.
Overcoming
hurdles, reaching a goal. Yeah. That kind of thing that you see in Americana so often. And we've spoken about like the movie adaptation previously, which is good. Go listen to that episode. I'm shamelessly pushing it. No, I'm shamelessly just pushing it on everybody, like as we do things. You know, and we did speak about this a lot when we spoke about the movie, obviously. But it really does have that kind of sense of, that's it, overcoming an obstacle and striving for something new and finding something better.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. And what's interesting about The Road, not to be confused with On the Road, which
by Jack Kerouac,
which is like OG Americana.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
You know, very, again, like both of them are kind of looking at like a journey, like a long journey through landscapes of America. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true for sure. Another one that is even, I guess, newer, I suppose, that I also think falls into that category is something like Where the Crawdads-Sing.
Oh, definitely. And what's really interesting about Where the Crawdads Sing, so, for anybody who's not familiar with the story, it's about, and you could talk to this better than I could, Megan.
Yeah.
We also had an episode on
We
this.
also did an episode about the movie, and I've read the book, and it really does, the book I find particularly really, really screams Americana to me.
But what's really interesting is if you take the aspect of Americana, like that we talked about in the last episode, or one of our last episodes, like of Mice and Men, and this having to move to go to the work. Where the Crawdads Sing is the opposite. She stays in her
very small sort of area, in her sort of bubble that she has created for herself.
And she finds work from within her.
Yes.
It's not a swamp. What is it? It's
like marshlands.
Marshlands.
Basically.
That's it. She finds work for herself within her marshlands, and she wants to stay within her marshlands. But again, it's all about the landscape and nature.
Yes,
and
because she's very in tune with the flora and fauna,
very much
in the area,
and that's how she makes her money. In the end, right? But it's also about trying to overcome this these social norms that are trying to be put on her and expectations, and how she doesn't meet those expectations,
and she kind of wants them, but then discovers very quickly discovers very quickly upon sort of trying to integrate herself into this kind of world that it's really not what she actually wants for herself at all, and she's happier living and being part of the land that she was born and raised on. Basically. If you go into a totally different sphere, but an equally interesting one, I think. You look at something like American Gods.
Oh, so I was hoping you were going to bring this one up.
Oh, yeah.
I love American Gods.
This is so interesting because American Gods was written by Neil Gaiman, who's a British author.
British.
And a lot of his other stories are set within Britain.
They are. Most of them are.
The majority of them are, I believe. Anyway, or at least a lot of them are. However, he does on occasion, have these little forays into other things, and American Gods happens to be one of those stories.
What's so interesting about American Gods is this fantasy aspect to it, which you don't typically get in Americana, but what's so interesting about American Gods is that it's talking about the deities that we as a society would have worshipped, whether it be, for the first settlers who came over, and then the evolution of, our beliefs, our religious beliefs as people. So again, going back to that identity. Yeah. And how it's evolved into the modern day worship of media and just different technology and stuff, and how that's clashing with our old values and our new values, but against
our old beliefs and new beliefs,
right? And against this backdrop of the landscape of America. Because they have to travel around,
and people coming to America for something new and bringing their old beliefs with them. However, over time those old beliefs fade, so these gods, quote unquote, lose their abilities and lose the strength that they once had. It's such an interesting idea. It's so interesting to think about and talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if we take American Gods as an example with this fantasy aspect, that in itself is almost a modernization of Americana, because we have such an appreciation for fantasy now, I feel.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
That we're finding any opportunity to integrate magic with our reality. And so we've started seeing that emerge in a lot of books and movies and TV shows, music, all kinds of things. 100%. So so it definitely fits so well with a modern landscape and a modern sensibility to an extent as a story, even though I think it was written in the 90s, actually. It was, but still, I mean, within our decades that we're looking at, it definitely fits.
It does very well. Can I make a big joke and be like, should we talk about Fight Club even though you're not supposed to?
So funny.
Yeah. That one kind of works really well within, again, a much more modern look at society and the mundane day-to-day and what that can do to people, and the level of escapism that some people are looking for within like a sort of, that's it, like a very boring, very humdrum kind of existence and stuff. Like you were going to say something and then you lost it.
I've literally just forgotten what the book was that you just mentioned.
Fight Club. Oh my God. Wow.
You see, the first rule of Fight Club.
It's because I'm not supposed to talk about it.
I'm not supposed to talk about Fight Club, Megan. That's why. I've only seen that movie once. I never read the book.
Oh my God, wow, I'm surprised. I feel like that movie is one of those that everybody for some reason saw a dozen times in the early 2000s, and then we all got annoyed with it and just stopped watching it.
Well, it's like, that one was an interesting one because, again, if we think about like the other books that we've been talking about, around this, like, you know, this contrast between what's happening in the background, like the, you know, historical events happening in the background versus like these interactions between the characters. It's like Fight Club is very much based on like the interactions within the characters.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And then a character that doesn't actually exist.
Yes,
right?
true.
He's not even real.
No.
And so then it becomes like, what kind of commentary is that making on modern day America? You know, we're so invested, or in this movie, you know, we so invested in this character who is all consuming, and then in the end he doesn't even exist.
He's not even real, and you're like,
then it kind of begs the question of like, you know, how does that apply to like us in modern day? And we have a lot of stuff like that in modern day. Like if you think about like social media and stuff.
Yes,
like,
it's true.
These are things that aren't even real. Like a lot of what you see online is not real. And now like with our new, you know, I don't want to say new, but with this big surge of all things AI, whether it be AI like books, or not books, but like art and music, and I'm sure we're going to get to books.
Writing. Well, no, we have already.
We have.
We have already.
You know, like it's what makes something real in the end, you know? And I think that's a commentary from that you can draw from Fight Club.
I think so.
Is if you experienced it and if it made you feel a certain way, is it real?
Yeah, no, it's true.
You know?
Interestingly, I guess they kind of work well together, because it's like that's the idea of something that exists and doesn't exist in modern society, and how we like, you know, like deal with that and everything. You know, we obviously in the previous episode we were talking about American Psycho, and that's definitely another book that really fits into that same kind of subgenre as well. Again, like, you know, your narrator is also unreliable and is so determined to maintain a certain facade. You have to wonder what American Psycho set now would look like with the advent of social media, and kind of like what that would do to a story like that. Yeah.
Can you imagine Patrick Bateman on Instagram?
It would just be a lot of curated photos. And you have to wonder, like, again, as his spiral continues, would he start like a live video and do something really fucked up? Or like talk about having done something? Like, would his confession have been a viral video, like a TikTok video or something?
Would he be like the first to all these platforms, you know?
Yeah.
Would he have his own TikTok channel?
And his confession at the end, would it not have been to
a body?
and would it not have been to his lawyer at the end? Would it have been like a confession that he does via like a TikTok live or something?
Yeah,
or like an Instagram live, whatever, you know.
It's an interesting concept, because you could apply that to a lot of things, like, you know, a lot of different like characters, and it's like, imagine what would that look like if they had social media?
Like, what would it look like? Yeah, that's it. Through a more modern lens that way, or through a more modern setting that way, it would make for a really weird story. I got the feeling.
I would be curious to see if there's like a mock like Patrick Bateman like social media account.
Probably.
You know, probably.
I would not be surprised at all. Something that falls into the more modern, but with like a time period, kind of would be something like The Help, probably.
Yeah. The Help is interesting because that one takes place in like the 60s.
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't, again, classify it as modern. However, it was written in 2009.
Yeah.
And the writing, and because I read The Help and I watched The Help, so I've seen, you know, both. It's really interesting because it's like a commentary, like a modern commentary on historical events.
Yeah.
And I think because it's a modern take, and obviously it's fiction, there's like a different spin on like the outcomes of the story and like what happens. Because I do not believe that if all those events had transpired in the 60s, that maybe they would have actually happened the way that they did.
Yeah, probably not.
you know, I don't know, but I thought that book was so good because it just really demonstrated, again, and I do agree that this is Americana, you know, the backdrop of, you know, all the social issues and the fact that, you know, the help in this case are, you know, women of color who are all working in wealthy white people's homes. And then you see like that difference between old money and new money. So like the woman who has, I can't remember which character works in her house, but she's clearly new money. Yeah. She married into, you know, a wealthy family and she doesn't know. Yeah. She doesn't know like all the pomp and circumstance.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Oh yes. She's the one that Jessica Chastain plays in the movie.
That's
I think, right. Yeah. She's very funny.
And so she's really sweet and she just wants to be friends with the person who works in her house.
Who's like, oh no, we're not supposed to do that.
No, we're not supposed to do that. You know, and then you've got the other one who essentially raises, played by Viola Davis.
Yes, in the movie,
essentially raises the little girl, and the little girl is, in the book, she's described as like not being very cute. And being a little chubby. So her mom, who's like this perfect, like, you know, what are they called? Sorority woman, you know, kind of looking, she doesn't have any time or patience for her daughter because she doesn't really fit.
She doesn't understand.
What she wants her
that's it.
to look like. And so, you know, Viola Davis is always telling her, you know, you is kind, you is smart, you is important.
Yeah.
And like those are the values that actually matter, but that are not being showcased by,
because her parents don't act as though that is important. It's a tough one, but it does kind of fit into, if you want the sociocultural commentary and stuff, that's definitely the kind of one that you can pick up for sure.
And the specific interactions between the characters for than anything. You know?
I did recently read Bones and All, which kind of it has that feel to it in a way that's difficult to describe, but it is also longing for something else out of your life, longing for a sense of belonging, longing for a sense of family, and traveling and going places to try to find that. And, you know, again, like it's sort of like across like a very American kind of landscape and stuff like that. Because yes, like at its, you know, on it's weird. It's a strange novel. On its surface, it is about people finding each other across, like, you know, in different parts of the states who are cannibals. Yeah. You know, but it's also like the lead, it's hard to describe this, the lead character, the times where she tends to like eat people is when she feels that she's like that this person like really loves her and is important to her, so it's like she wants to consume that feeling. Almost it seems like that's part of what triggers her. It's so weird.
That's so strange.
It's fascinating. It was a fascinating read, I will say. It's one of those where you walk away from it and you're like, I don't know how I felt about that, like in like what my actual feelings are about it, but I will say it's a very interesting story in that way. It's very interesting to see. So and it just had that kind of vibe to it, and I have not watched the movie yet. For anybody who isn't aware, because again it's such an odd story that I think it wasn't one of those that was going to get like a ton of buzz at release, but there was a film version of this that came out maybe a couple of years ago at the time that we're recording this with Timothée Chalamet. But again, directed by Luca Guadagnino, who had previously done Call Me by Your Name, which was also a really big deal when that film came out.
Chalamet.
With Timothée Chalamet, which is I'm sure why they worked together again on this film, but it didn't get the same kind of buzz because again, it's a very taboo, strange topic, and I think that a lot of people would not have understood or known how to react to something like that. I get the feeling that since I've read the book, watching the film, I will probably appreciate more. Maybe if I had gone in and just watched the film without getting some of like the internal monologues and aspects and understanding the characterization of some of the like the people who are in the story, I would have been like, oh, what the fuck? What the fuck is this? So I think that chances are I will watch the movie at some point. Maybe we could do an episode on it too. Who knows? Because it would be an interesting thing to kind of touch on.
I mean, there are like certain subjects that are not explored very often.
That's definitely one of them.
And there's a reason for it. Like, you know, I think that as a society, we've got to a point where we don't get the ick about a lot of things, but like anything to do with like children that is like unacceptable towards them.
Yeah.
We don't do that. And cannibalism. It's like these are the two things that it's like we don't really explore these very often because like let's not.
Maybe let's not do that. Maybe let's just not let's pretend that we're not doing that. Yeah, it's true. And then what's interesting that we can kind of get into a little bit as well is when you get into either like your like mostly like your nonfiction that can very much be Americana because it's talking about like real life events. So I think the two examples that we had were The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson,
right,
and Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran,
right. And they just made a movie of Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh god, yeah, I think everybody knows. As soon as Scorsese has a new movie that comes out, everybody's aware of it. No, I haven't gotten around to it yet. It's like 3.5 hours long. I'll probably get there.
Subject matter.
Yeah, I'll probably get there eventually. Yes, I've also heard the rumblings from First Nations people about the fact that wouldn't it be nice if a First Nations person were behind the camera telling the story, because perhaps they would have a different perspective and maybe make things a little bit less violent and perhaps less focused on the white characters in the film, and we could tell a story properly.
Which would absolutely be needed for something like this.
And I think probably, I get the feeling it should have been handled maybe more sensitively than it was. And perhaps Martin Scorsese, while being an incredible director, has made maybe too many mob movies that focus a lot on gangsters and killing each other. And maybe this was not the right choice for him.
I remember when they announced that this was coming out, I thought it was genuinely bizarre that Scorsese was going to be directing this, given just all of the, I don't know, like our changing attitudes towards this type of subject matter. Yeah. The fact that we've come so far and yet have not come not nearly far enough in our understanding of, you know, stories like this and how they need to be told by the right voice, especially when it comes to First Nations, Indigenous, stories. Yeah. And so I was very surprised, and it does not surprise me to hear that there's been rumblings, because naturally there would be, and there should be.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The only thing that I will say that I have heard from start to finish is that Lily Gladstone, who plays the lead character in the film, is incredible. She's wonderful. She's been winning awards, and my understanding is that it's very rightfully so, and she's the first Indigenous woman to be doing that, and that's wonderful, and that's great, and I'm really glad that she's receiving any kind of recognition that a First Nations person has actually been able to break through a bit of a barrier that way.
Yeah, and so maybe that's like one of the positive things that's going to come out of this.
Is that maybe you need a big time white director to get certain spotlights shone on people who deserve it.
Agree.
Yeah. So that's all I'll say about that. And The Devil in the White City, which, man, I don't know if we're ever getting a movie adaptation of that, but I hope we do.
Good if we did.
Well, so there's been so much back and forth about it, because there was a film moving forward at one point. Leonardo DiCaprio actually had the rights to this for years and years and years and years.
Leo,
and years.
You're all over these things.
Honestly. And then that wound up falling by the wayside. And then there was a film, like they were working on doing something with it. And I believe that, The Devil in the White City, for clarification's sake, for people who aren't aware, is a nonfiction novel written by Eric Larson, which is tells the story of basically the build-up and the entire process of the, 1896? Or
1887.
1887 to 1890-something, the Chicago World's Fair, which ran for a number of years. And at the same time, within the backdrop of this massive event in Chicago, there was arguably, what I believe to be America's first official serial killer, was prowling the streets and going from place to place in America, H.H. Holmes. He used the World's Fair as a bit of a cover for some of what he was doing. And he also, people seem to think that he only did this in Chicago. He didn't. He did this in several states and all over the place, really. However, the World's Fair was a very good cover for him and a way for him to earn a certain amount of money and things like this at the same time, and an easy way for people to disappear at a time where the city was so incredibly populated because of everything that was happening within its confines. But there was either a series or a movie that was in the works a little while ago, and because the story also follows the architect who was basically the man who was behind the World's Fair, like the design, the preparation, the planning, all of that stuff. I know that Keanu Reeves had signed on to play that character, and now I think that's not happening anymore. So I really don't know like, where are we headed with this? I don't know what we're doing. I don't know where we're going with it. I have no idea.
1893.
Thank you. I wasn't sure. It was like 1890 something.
I'm like, I knew I had this on my bookshelf somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not mine. It's my husband's.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Keanu, make this movie happen. Like, if you're gonna do it, please do it, because it's a really good, like, it's a very well written book. So I would be really curious to see like a version of it put to film. And weirdly, in spite of how prolific he was, we have not seen much in the way of film adaptations of H.H. Holmes, which is very surprising.
That is odd.
He has not gotten the kind of coverage that Jack the Ripper has, and it was around the same time period, and what he did was so fucking crazy, and it's so intricate to just like sort of see like where, like, everywhere that he started and all like the like things that he was doing, the scams he was running, the things he was doing to people. It was so bizarre and involved that you could really do a lot with that story.
Well, it's interesting, like, now that you're bringing it up, you know, it is our, I wouldn't say recent, but ongoing exploration of serial killers from the United States.
Yes.
Like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer. You know, we keep making movies, shows, books about these guys. And it's like, is that in itself a piece of Americana?
Kind of. It's a piece of American history.
It certainly is.
And,
you know,
America is, like, you know, probably the place on the planet with the most active serial killers, or most serial killers, I believe, on record.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken. I don't know about active right now necessarily, but on record, I believe that America is the place that has had the most history with that.
And it's interesting because it's now become part of their identity in some ways. I'm not making sweeping statements here, but just in the context of what we're talking about here, is that these are like recurring themes that we're seeing, and just these, you know, characters, these people that keep being brought back. And I really don't think that we should continue to glorify them. Like, I really don't think that we should continue to be putting the spotlight on these heinous crimes. Because to what end? Like, what is our purpose of it? You know, that is my biggest question. Every time I see something new come out about, like, Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer.
Ted Bundy is one that I have a really particular issue with, I think, because of the glorification aspect of things. We keep, you know, like, making these, like, films and stuff like that, and we're there and we're like, oh, we got to cast someone really handsome and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, stop.
Yeah,
stop
just
that.
Stop. Like, and we saw it with the Dahmer show on Netflix.
Yeah.
Like, that one was hard to watch.
Ooh, that was rough. That was very difficult. And side note, I'm really glad that Niecy Nash has gotten so much credit for her performance in that, and that she's won awards and things like that, because it's really nice that we're finally starting to give a little bit of notice to the characters who aren't necessarily like the loudest characters in a production and stuff, but are still doing such a great job of their characters. It's so difficult sometimes when, like, you know, you're watching something and you can tell that someone's never going to get credit for it because they're playing like the straight man, so they're like the person who's maybe not as funny or not as loud or not as intense, but is still but like that now we're actually starting to realize, like, hey, how great is that performance? And how much does that person deserve accolades for that performance? So anyway, so that's like a whole interesting aspect of it. But I find that, yeah, you know, we might not want to look at it quite that way, but the nonfiction aspect of things really lends itself well to Americana in that sense too, whether it be like cases like this or whether it be through the political sphere.
Yeah, that's a lot now, too.
Or something in that vein. But there's just like so much to it. But I think that those are some like pretty good choices, I guess, for like modern, like really like modern novels that fit into that like Americana kind of way of looking at things. Anyway, if you guys have any choices for like modern Americana that you think that, like, you know, like you've read that you really find fit into that sphere that we've missed out on, whatever it is, you can let us know about that over on TikTok, Threads, and Instagram at fullybookedca. And you can also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/book was way better. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.